thank you. And I've tripped over your grandfather's feet many times, so you do have big shoes to I don't think the tripping was intentional, but I thought we ought to start with a parable. And there was a little girl, and she wrote a letter to God. She said, "Dear God, I'd like $100. I'll do good things with it. Could I just have $100? So she sent it off in the mail, and it got to the postmaster, and the postmaster said, "Well, this is cute, but where am I going to send the letter?" And so he sent it to the president. The president said, "Oh, that's really cute." And so the president sent her $5. So she got it. She got $5, and she's like, $5. But her parents told her, always write a thank you. So she wrote a thank you, and she said, "Dear God, thanks for the $5, but next time don't send it through Washington. They stole 95% of it." To be a good parable, though, it has to have an exposition. So the little girl's a conservative. She's like, you don't need to send it to Washington. At the very worst, send it to Des Moines, send it to Franklin. Don't send it to Washington. Now, if she were a moderate, she'd have said, well, let's just try to get $10 back from Washington instead of $5. And if she were a liberal, she would have said, well, golly, you just better ask for $1,000, and then maybe you'll get $100. But the little girl was a conservative. Now, I thought I'd also start out with some apologies, and I want to make them stand up and get embarrassed to Andrea Spiker. Is she still here? Stand up, please. I'm first going to apologize to your husband because I called him A.J. Stryker this morning. That sounds like a good name, Stryker, but his name's really A.J. Spiker. And I had told Jan Michelson, the whole audience, it was A.J. Stryker. But A.J. Spiker, your chairman, I got his name wrong. But then I found out that Andrea, he and his wife, it's their 10-year anniversary, and he drug her out to this miserable thing here in Kentucky. Let's congratulate them for 10 years. I also want to particularly apologize to Senator Grassley. Senator Grassley has to hear me all the time. So, I mean, what a guy that would come and listen to me, and he hears me all week saying this and that at lunch. And he came out, so I'm very appreciative of you sitting through one more speech. Now, I always feel at home when I come to Iowa. I've made several trips here now, and I actually got to have breakfast with the governor. It's like, wow, this is the first time I've ever had breakfast in the governor's mansion. It was pretty neat. And I was like, wow, he's almost treating me like a visiting business that could relocate to Iowa and bring all kinds of income to Iowa. And I was like, wow, this is pretty neat. Maybe is there some kind of cottage industry here where people like national politicians come in and bring millions of dollars, and then 4 years later they come again, then they come again, and they say, well, maybe next time I will like me better next time if I just bring in a few more $1 million to the economy. So, but anyway, he was very nice. He's always been very generous to me when I've come here. One of my favorite writers is Dostoevsky, and Dostoevsky wrote Crime and Punishment. And it's an examination of crime and guilt and faith and struggle with faith. And he also wrote at one time that I did not arrive at my Hosanna through childlike faith. I came there through a fiery pit of doubt. And I know that sounds really dramatic, but it kind of describes my journey in life a little bit. It may be an overly dramatic description of it. But my faith hasn't always been easy for me. It's not easy for me to talk about. It's not been without obstacles. I tend not to wear it on my sleeve. It's just kind of who I am. It's a little difficult for me. I am a Christian, but I'm not always a good one. I mean, I guess there might be some other sinners in the crowd, but I'm not perfect, and I realize it. But I'm also just not perfect in always understanding and accepting my faith the way I need to. I grew up in mathematics and science. I went to medical school, and you know, you see some good things, you see a lot of bad things in the world. You know, you struggle with these. You know, as a physician, I would see the inexplicable diseases, the sadness of people struck down in the prime of their life, tumors in small children. And you know, there's one part of the Hippocratic Oath that says you're not supposed to discuss things of a private nature. And I think we can all kind of imagine what that means, but I think it means something beyond what we think it means. It's that there's a burden. There's a burden to seeing a lot of tragedy. Really, a lot of people don't need to be burdened with that. But it is somewhat of a burden because you see it and you struggle to see the design people have and to see a design in the world when you see so much tragedy, when you see man's inhumanity to man. When Mrs. Jones presents with pancreatic cancer, you don't always know what to say. You can see in her eyes, but you don't always know what to say and how to say it. You know, she knows the diagnosis and she knows what it means. We've all had family members that have realized something like this has happened to them. My first patient as a medical student had melanoma that had already spread to her ovaries. She was a beautiful young lady about my age. She was probably 23 years old. And I knew she didn't have long to live. She didn't survive, but I wasn't there at the time, but it sticks with you to see those images and to know what people have gone through, to see people struggling with leukemia, to see people go through bone marrow transplants, sometimes successfully, sometimes not successfully. When I was an intern, I will never forget having to tell a family, that their loved one had died for the first time. I was 25, and, really, I don't think I'd had anybody in my family die before, and at 3 or 4 in the morning, it was my job to go in and tell the family. We'd struggled all night with this young man who had been in a massive motor vehicle accident and had crushing injuries to the chest, and you think, well, you just put him on a ventilator, they'll survive, but sometimes that doesn't work. You put him on a ventilator, you keep forcing air in, with the lungs keep filling up with fluid, and the blood vessels leak, and it's just a terrible situation. We kept putting chest tubes in all night. The young boy didn't survive. And I'll never forget being sent in, to be the one at 3 or 4 in the morning, exhausted from working half the night to try to save him, and having 25 family members there, and I struggled not to cry to do this. They're all crying, and it's just, the emotions of it and the things you have to overcome and get through when you're in medicine. But these are things that also test one's faith as you go through this. I struggled sometimes with caring too much, and sometimes I think, frankly, not caring enough. It's a difficult balance. You care too much. Can you handle the emotions of caring too much? Then you turn out to be callous and cynical and not caring enough. This happens to me in other areas of life too, not just in medicine. When I read All Quiet on the Western Front, I was struck, man's inhumanity to man. What happens in war? 1 million people died in the Battle of the Somme over 17 days. The tragedy and the gruesomeness of trudging from one trench to the other. Thousands of young men flying up out of a trench and running, hell-bent for the other side and being mowed down by the hundreds and thousands. It was a war that was confusing in many ways. It was a war fought between cousins. I think Wilhelm was cousin to the King of England at the time. It was hard for the people fighting the war to understand. It's still hard for us to really figure out why World War I started, and what it was really about. I read a book called Silent Night. In that they talk about the Christmas Eve armistice. You may have heard this story. It's in the middle of World War I. Christmas Eve comes and the battle's horrendous. There are, sometimes 50, 75% of companies would be killed. And Christmas Eve, the British hear the Germans singing carols, Christmas carols. They hear it, and gradually, these people have been shooting at each other, mowing each other down. They gradually hear the Christmas carols. They gradually creep out of the trenches. They ultimately sing songs together. They exchange cigarettes. They kick the soccer ball around, and they kind of forgot what they were there for. And then when the armistice, the unofficial armistice was over, they went back into the trenches, but they wouldn't fight anymore. They had to be sent away from those lines because they wouldn't fight anymore. Now, I'm not naive enough to think we can never have war, but I am conscious of the fact of the horrors of war. I'm conscious of the fact that I think our country needs leaders who understand that, and not leaders who think that war is a sports game, that you're for the New Orleans Saints, and that's an all-out war on the fields of war is just no big deal. War's a big deal, and it should be the most important thing we ever vote on when we're in Congress. It should be done deliberately, very deliberately, and very rarely when everything else fails. I'm not a pacifist, but I think it is wrong to elect leaders who have glee or eagerness for war, and these people shouldn't be leading any nation. And this is something that's important as we go through all of these processes.